Hello lovely people, welcome to another episode of Book Chat, the regular but not monthly roundup of what I've been reading recently.
Sophie Vlogs.
Before I dive in, two notes. One, I have a cold. Two, a man is cutting his grass outside. I'm gonna do my best to let neither of those things interfere with this recording, but I'm sorry if I'm sneezing or there's an annoying noise in the background. We're just gonna have to get through it. There's some books to talk about. First up is a book that was one of my 10 books I wanted to read in 2018, and that is Women Who Run with the Wolves, Contacting the Power of the Wild Woman by Clarissa Pinkola Estes. This was my February read. It pretty much took me the whole of February to read this book. Or was it January? I don't know anymore. I feel like this is still something that I am sitting with and mulling over. So the concept of this book is, Clarissa Pinkola Estes is a Jungian psychologist, and she is also a cantadora, which is like a storyteller slash story gatherer. So what this book is Jungian analyses of these folk tales and fairy tales that she's gathered, and then sort of applying them to us and this concept of the wild woman within. So my understanding of what the wild woman concept is that in today's society and stuff, the lives we lead take us away from the wild woman within ourselves. And so then this whole book is about finding ways to get back in contact with that, and the ways that that exponentially improves your quality of life. That's like a very simplified description of this. So the basic structure is each chapter sort of starts with a folk tale. Some chapters have more than one folk tale, but most of them start with a folk tale, and then the rest of the chapter is like this Jungian psychoanalysis of what this tale like tells us about like the unconscious things in your mind. I'm not very big on Jungian psychology. It's not something I've really like dealt with a lot. I think I touched on it with some university stuff. Not really like something I'm hugely familiar with. I did really enjoy this. I have learned things. So there are some of the things she's saying and some of the points she is making are things which I think are really, really valuable. Sometimes the way she is making the point isn't something that I can connect with. So I did connect with a lot of this. But there were a lot of other things within it that just didn't emotionally resonate with me, but that's fine because I can understand that different people will have different responses when reading this. So my favourite parts of this were the folk tales, because I love me some folk tales. So I really enjoyed reading the different folk tales. I did like the psychoanalysis aspect of it, and I think there are definitely some really valuable lessons within this to be learned. Not all of them were stuff that I can apply to my life, but that's just because of where I'm at. But for example, I have a friend who is currently in the process of reading this, and she's finding it immensely valuable and very worthwhile in changing how she approaches herself and other people and stuff like that. So I think there is definitely value to be taken from this. I think there will be some people for whom this is a book that does not work for them at all, and I can understand that. So yes, interesting. I think it's gonna need some mulling, but I think I've taken some stuff from this. I think there'll be more stuff to be taken from this as I go on with my life. But an interesting read. We move from a huge sodding book to a tiny little comic. This is issue 1 of Betty and Veronica Vixens. This was just lovely, because it's just Betty and Veronica being like, shall we start a girl gang? Yes! Haven't got any of the others. Might get round to reading them at some point, but my to-read list is too long, so, like, I'm gonna, like, put a pin in that. But this was a present, and thank you, Mark. I loved it. It's all the Betty and Veronica I want. Just want them to ditch the boys, to be honest. Ride off into the sunset on a motorbike together. That's what I want. Next up is a book which everyone has been raving about for so long, and I knew I was gonna get on that train eventually. But I finally read The Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue by Mackenzi, and it was a glorious, rollicksome romp. This tells the story of Monty, who, with his best friend and his sister, goes on his grand tour. Back in Victorian times, guys went on grand tours and they sort of just like toured around Europe and generally had a frolicsome rich time type thing. Monty is in love with his best friend. They go on their grand tour. Kerfuffles and shenanigans ensue. They end up becoming embroiled in this wild journey, and they have to travel hither and thither. And quite frankly, this was utterly delightful. Mackenzi Lee likes a lot of parts of history which I like. For example, the history of pirates. Oh hell yes. I actually have a book about the history of pirates. I've already forgotten what it's called, but it's the one that the guy wrote, which is where we get all of the pirate legends from, where he was like, I can't remember. But suffice to say, this was utterly lovely. Monty as a protagonist can sometimes be a little bit irksome, but like deliberately so, because he does live this immensely wealthy, privileged life. His best friend Percy is a black man who is living in this Victorian reality, so is often met with discrimination. And his sister, who is a woman who wants to be educated in Victorian society, again. So Percy and... is it Amelia? No, Felicity. Where did Amelia come from? Percy and Felicity were like absolute darlings and I love them so much. And then Monty, you're just like, I like you, Monty, but stop being a dick. But this was wonderful. It went loads of places which I love it. We went to Venice. We had like a pirate thing. We had like blah, 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 blah. It was just a rollicksome, delightful time. Another rollicksome, delightful time is The Lost Plot by Genevieve Cogman. This is the 4th book in the Invisible Library series, I believe. I love this series so much. The Invisible Library series is like, there are multiple worlds. The library is like this interdimensional place, and librarians go out into these alternate worlds to find rare and obscure books that only exist in like certain realities, and to take a copy of them back to the library. And by filling the library with all these books, they maintain like a stability. And then within the worlds there are fae, who are agents of chaos, and there are dragons, who are agents of order/law. And I did a video when the previous book came out, which I will link below, which was all talking about how that kind of ties into this Michael Moorcockian idea of the eternal champion and the person/being who must try and maintain order within the cosmic like way of life and all this sort of thing. Like the library very much to me like feels like an eternal champion type concept. This was delightful. Irene just goes off of essentially what this book manages to do is it has all the delight of time travel without having to worry about paradoxes. By having all of these alternate worlds that you can go into, you can explore different times and different concepts and stuff. So like Irene's world that she is assigned to, that she spends most of her time in, it's like a Victorian type reality, whereas the world she goes into for the majority of this is it's sort of like a 1940s. Am I right in saying 1940s rather than 1920s? I could be wrong there, but like a sort of might be more 1920s actually, like a American gangster sort of prohibition-y almost, like this whole sort of concept, which is just like fabulous that we through this series get to explore so many different times whilst also having like delightfully interesting takes on these alternate worlds. What would happen like with this one, like guns are everywhere. The previous one in this series shone a big light on fae. This one does the same but for dragons. We learn a lot more about dragons, how they work, and essentially someone's fucked up. Irene's got to go and stop absolute chaos from exploding. That's like the gist. This was delightful as always. I love this series with all my heart. It's wonderful. Final book I want to talk to you about today is The Muse by Jessie Burton. This reminds me a lot of Hannah Rothschild's The Improbability of Love, mainly because it is about a painting and trying to find out where a painting came from or the backstory behind a painting. So I think the main story is set around like the 60s, and then there's also flashing back to like the 30s, 40s to find out the history of this painting. So our main character Odell starts working at this, is it like a gallery? Yeah, a skeleton gallery. And then her boss, Marjorie Quick, is sort of like an enigmatic, mysterious figure, and she can tell that Marjorie Quick knows something about this painting. And as the book goes on, you have the two narratives, and you discover more about the painting and the backstory, and you figure out what it is that ties Marjorie Quick to it. And as this goes on, Odell is learning about her approach to writing and stuff like this. So you have like this thread of writing running throughout, you have this thread of this painting, and then you have like the complex interwoven stories of all the people involved with the painting. This was a lot of fun, actually. I think I enjoyed this about the same amount as I enjoyed The Miniaturist by Jessie Burton. I have enjoyed The Miniaturist a lot more since I saw the BBC adaptation, because I really liked the BBC adaptation because it drew a lot on like the art style of like the Dutch Golden Age and stuff like that, which was gorgeous, and kind of rejuvenated my enjoyment of The Miniaturist. So, yes, this was a lot of fun. That's where we're going to end that. Those are all the books I wanted to talk about this week. Have you read any of them? Do you have any thoughts on what I have said? Would you like to chat to me about books? That's the whole concept of book chat. I do this every time. I'm like, how do I round it up? Just chat to me. I'm going to stop talking because the cold is making me feel a little bit like giddy. So I hope you have a really nice week, and I will see you next time for something different.